están, queridos amigos de Proyecto Grado Cero? Un saludo a la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, la UNAM, queridos colegas de Latinoamérica, Estados Unidos y Europa que nos escuchan y nos ven a través de todas nuestras plataformas. Hoy nos encontramos con el profesor Scott Hershovitz. Él vino a la Ciudad de México a un seminario muy interesante titulado Ronald Dworkin, Derecho, Moral e Interpretación, donde estuvieron grandes juristas de Estados Unidos, de Inglaterra, que tienen en común estudiar el pensamiento de este gran filósofo del derecho. Scott Hershovitz es profesor de la Universidad de Michigan y presentó un tema que se llama The End of Jurisprudence. Esta entrevista va a ser en inglés, así es que disfrútenla mucho y bienvenidos. Professor Scott, welcome to the program.
Thank you, glad to be here.
Yes, first of all, we want to talk with you about the Dworkin ideas.
Sure.
What is the importance of the Dworkin ideas right now?
Today. So it's really hard to wrap your head around all the things that Dworkin did. There was really no area of contemporary legal philosophy that he left untouched, and he wrote widely beyond law. He wrote about the nature of religion. He wrote about the nature of value in general. He wrote about the political philosophy, he wrote about moral philosophy, he wrote about the nature of morality. So when you say what's the relevance of the Dworkin ideas, it's hard to know where to begin. But I think that the key thing that Dworkin wanted to tell people about law, which I think is a kind of a timeless message, is he wanted to help people see that claims about what the law requires of you, claims about what your legal obligations are, what your legal rights are, they're not claims that are true just in virtue of what people say and do. They're claims whose truth depends on morality. And the reason that's important is because an inquiry into what the law requires is a moral inquiry. We need not just to look at what texts say or what statutes say or what judicial opinions say, but we also need to have a moral conversation about the relevance of our political history and what those documents say to the problems that we face now.
Can we think the law excluding moral issues?
So Dworkin's view was that it couldn't. So that we were always trying to figure out, in light of our political history, in light of the Constitution, in light of the statutes that have been passed, in light of the decisions that have been made, how ought people like us to behave now? What rights should we understand ourselves to have? What obligations should we understand ourselves to have? And he spent his career arguing against people who thought that the content of the law is divorced from morality, that it's just a matter of what the documents say or what the judges say. So the central message that he had for people about law was that it's deeply intertwined with morality. It's not something that can be separated from it.
Okay, you were here in a seminar for Dworkin's, to dialogue about Dworkin's ideas. What is your experience dialoguing with other scholars with these topics? What do you learn about these dialogues, and what we should do before this seminar?
Sure. Well, this particular seminar, which was in honor of Dworkin, he passed away last year, was just wonderful. It was wonderful because it collected so many people from around the world who were interested in Dworkin's ideas, people who don't see each other on a regular basis coming together to talk about them. And so it was wonderful to see just the broad interest that Dworkin's writings and his philosophy have generated, and I learned a lot from the conversation. It's hard to convey in a short interview all of the things that we talked about over the course of the day. But one thing I was struck by as I sat there listening was just the incredible breadth of Dworkin's writing. So this morning there was a session about religious liberty and Dworkin's way of understanding the kinds of accommodations that a government should make in order to protect religious freedom. And that was followed by different presentations about the ways in which judges should decide cases, and different ways of understanding just how it is that we come to have the moral obligations or the legal obligations and the legal rights that we do. And so it's as I said, just the sheer breadth of Dworkin's work, there's really no contemporary issue in moral or political philosophy or legal philosophy, certainly, that you could have from which you couldn't learn by engaging his writings. And I guess, in the answer to the question, what should you do to prepare for a seminar like this? I think a particular talent of Dworkin's was writing clearly and writing accessibly for a non-expert audience. That's a lot of his other interlocutors, people he is engaging with as legal philosophers, aren't so good at writing for people who don't spend a lot of time thinking about philosophy of law. But Dworkin was a wonderful writer. He was wonderful at explaining things, and he wrote for a popular audience. So he wrote lots of essays in the New York Review of Books about the great constitutional issues of the day in the United States. And through those essays, you can also see a lot of the philosophical views that he has about morality and law more generally. So I'd say start reading there.
Okay. Now, you wrote an article named "The End of Jurisprudence," and you start saying that the main debate on the last 40 years was the Hart and Dworkin's debate.
Yes.
What is the actuality of this debate, and what we have to do to work this debate? Because first was Dworkin and Hart, but next was the followers of Dworkin and the followers of Hart, and they have different opinions.
That's right.
But they continue the discussion.
That's right. Yeah. So I think the best way to understand that debate is to read Hart and Dworkin themselves, because Hart was also somebody who was a really very clear writer, and so I always encourage my students, start with Hart, read Dworkin's criticisms of Hart, look at the way that Hart responded, and then branch out to think about all the really wonderful philosophers that have participated in the debate and made important contributions to it. People like Joseph Raz and Jules Coleman and Scott Shapiro and Mark Greenberg from a more recent generation, and many other philosophers. I can name them all day, but the place to start really is with Hart and Dworkin, because they frame the issues about the nature of law so well. And if you only read Hart and Dworkin, you would understand most of what was going on.
Well, and in your article, then, "The End of Jurisprudence," what are you trying to say to us?
Sure. So the Hart-Dworkin debate is, there's lots of different ways of thinking about what's at stake, but I think the best way to think about what's at stake is it's about the Constitution, the Constitution of our legal rights, obligations, privileges, and powers. And the dispute is between people like Hart, who think that if you want to figure out what makes it the case that we have the legal rights and obligations that we do, you only look at social facts. You look at facts about what people have said and done, and those facts will determine what our legal rights and obligations are. And on Dworkin's side of the debate, he thinks, well, you look at what people have said and done, but you also have to look at moral facts that establish the relevance of what they've said and done to the kinds of questions we have about what our legal rights and obligations are. And in The Law's Empire, he explained the way in which he thinks our political history answers the kinds of questions about what kind of legal rights and obligations that we have now. The paper that I wrote, called "The End of Jurisprudence," suggests that this may not be the most fruitful conversation for us to be having. So here's something that most philosophers of law would agree on. Law involves lots of involves very complicated social practices, people saying and doing lots of different sorts of things, and there are moral consequences to the things that people say and do. But for the most part, the debate has been focused not on the moral consequences of the things that people say and do, but rather on something intermediate. Right? The thought is that the social practices create the law, and then we ask, in light of that law, what morally ought we to do? and the debate has been about the constitution of the thing that sits in the middle, the constitution of the law. And some people say it's just a function of the social practices, and other people say it's a function of the social practices plus some moral facts. And the suggestion I make in the end of jurisprudence is maybe we could look at the problem a different way. Maybe we could think that there's just on the one hand the social practices, and on the other hand moral consequences of them, but nothing in the middle, no distinctively legal rights, obligations, privileges, and powers whose constitution we need to figure out. We would still on this picture have legal rights, obligations, privileges, and powers, but they would be a subset of the moral consequences of our practices. And so it's an attempt just to reformulate the issues in jurisprudence and invite people to think about them in a different way.
Well, I want to thank you for this moment, for these words, because we are interested in Mexico to know more about this hard and working debate. I think we are not reading these topics, and it's very important to work it here in Mexico.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I want to tell you that what would you say to Mexican students that want to know more about jurisprudence, to these authors that gave us some important ideas?
Yeah, so I think I keep repeating myself. I think I would stick with the advice that I gave before, which is that there's no better way to understand Dworkin than to read him. And I think I don't know exactly what of Dworkin's work has been translated into Spanish, although I suspect that most of his major books have at this point. And I would say start by reading them and wrestling with the questions that Dworkin is wrestling with. It's he has answers, but he also wants to get people to think about where the answers come from and the process that's involved in answering a question about whether there's a legal right. So read what Dworkin has to say, but then reflect on the methodology that you use when you're trying to decide, does a plaintiff in this particular case have a right, or does a defendant have an obligation, and ask yourself how well Dworkin's view of how that works matches up with your own experience.
Okay, well, thank you very much for this time, and we want to see you more here in Mexico and read your work.
I would love that. That would be great. Thank you very much.